For typography today, we're going to work on something a little bit different. As you can see, this is Google Docs. One thing I kind of realized is that most people, most students, even most design professionals, you honestly end up spending a lot of time just doing type in a document. You don't have the time, energy, or care, or you're not on a device that has one of your pieces of editing software like Illustrator, InDesign, Inkscape, whatever you may use. You just don't have those things. But most people have or use a Google Doc account. Since you're here at ASU, you have a Google Docs account available to you. You can just go use it whenever you want. Let's go through some of the things that we can do with Google Docs and some of the ways that we can make our documents better. And just some of the things that I think that with a little bit of knowledge of typography and kind of how to make type look good, we can make documents just so much more attractive. And a lot of this is just having an eye for what looks good and what doesn't, but it helps to have the tools to make that stuff work. Before we get started with anything else, let's talk about our borders. So we have what you can see here. We have our edges, right? If we were going to do this in Illustrator, this is where we would put our guides, or in InDesign, this is where we put our guides. This would be the edge of the document. And you can see that there's an inch on either side here. And we can actually move these things. I can actually grab this and we can move it, right? That's a half an inch. That's a full inch. You can see that it's leaving my cursor alone, but if I reduce this to half an inch, it'll bring my cursor over there and give me that half inch. It will also work on this side as well. Now I can actually move this little arrow and the shaded part differently, and you can see that this one says right margin. Oh, it's not showing you guys the tooltips. It says right margin with the tooltip here. The tooltip for the arrow is right indent. Same thing over here. We have right margin, or I'm sorry, left margin, left indent, and then first line indent is this top thing. We're not going to worry about that for right now. Over on this left side, we have the same thing. We have 1 inch. And now, I'm not really a big fan of the way that they do this because it's relative, and relative measurements always get you in trouble eventually. Is that this is our 0 point. It'd be really nice if they had just put a 0 here, but they didn't. So this is 0, this is a positive 1, this is a negative 1. Same thing is happening up here. This is our 0 point, negative 1/2, positive 1, positive 2, 3, and so forth. As opposed to starting this at 0, 0, and then giving us our measurements out like we're used to, we have to realize that this edge, where the left and top margin are, that's going to be our 0, 0 point. So we do need to be a little bit cautious on how we align things because it is going to mess with our document. So if I wanted half-inch margins, all I would do is pop this up until I see that half-inch tick that's a little heavier right there. That will give me half an inch here and half an inch here. So this top and side, and then I would have to go down and do the same thing down here at the bottom. And that would give me a half-inch margin on every side. I don't want that. We're going to leave this document alone for right now. So I'm going to pull these back to 1. And if we have 1-inch margins on each side, right? If we have 1-inch margins on each side, that's going to give us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.5 inches of column width. And if we have 1 inch top and bottom, that is going to take our 11-inch page and knock it down to 9 inches. So our usable space for this is about 6.5 by 9, which is actually kind of close to what a comic book page is. But yeah, so this is 6.5 by 9. This is the standard document. I'm going to pull some text out of Wikipedia like usual. Let's grab some of this. So I'm just copying some text, Control copy. One thing you can do, and this is something that I notice with students a lot, is that when you guys copy and paste stuff, you don't fix formatting. So it's very obvious that you've copied and pasted stuff from a bunch of different places. don't do that. If you're going to copy and paste stuff, you can right click and hit paste without formatting, or as you can see here, Control Shift V, right? Control C is copy, or Command C is copy. Command V or Control V is paste. Paste without formatting is Control Shift V or Command Shift V. What that does is it just pastes all of that text in there without any of the junk associated with it. So you don't get font information, you don't get how it's laid out, nothing. You just get the body copy. And that's what we want most of the time. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So I've pasted in here. We have about 2 pages of stuff. And now we can see a few things up at the top. Let's just go through some of the things that really matter. 100%, this is just your zoom. This doesn't change anything about the document or anything about the way it's going to print, so be cautious with that. Some people will zoom in and then say, oh, well, that text is plenty big enough, and then print it, and then realize that, well, that's not actually what it's going to print at. You need to be very cautious that you're paying attention to how big your page actually is. This we're going to get into later. Don't worry about styles for right now. The font. This is just like anything else. These are your fonts. You can see that my recent ones are these, and I have all of these selected. You can add more fonts up here in Google Docs, so I'd suggest you do that if you like using Google Docs. I use, Arial a lot because it's just fine. It's not amazing, but it's fine. Roboto is one that I use a lot. And Droid Sans and Droid Serif are ones that I like a lot. When you're doing papers for school, oftentimes TNR, Times New Roman, is going to be what is asked for, so you can go ahead and pick that out right there. I don't like it. I don't think it looks good, but that's all right. If we want to select all of our type, we can Control A. Will give us a selection of the entire thing. If we want to set it to Times New Roman, we can do that. So there's Times New Roman for us. So this is what everybody's going to ask for papers. It's, in my opinion, just impossibly flavorless, but that's fine. That's probably because we see it for papers. Now we can look at a few things. We have our font, we like that. We know what bold, italic, underline, text color, highlight color, all that stuff. We know what all these things are. We also know our alignment. Right? We have our alignment, just the same as anything else. Line and paragraph spacing. Google Docs automatically does 1.15, which is like the leading we have in Illustrator or InDesign, but you can set it to other things too. You can also customize your spacing if you want. I think 1.15 looks pretty good. Single's fine. It's a little bit tight, but I think that it looks good for most things. That's really just kind of what you're doing and who your audience is. Remember, if you have an audience where reading is going to be more difficult, you're going to want more and more line spacing. If you just want to fit more stuff on a page, single spacing is just fine. Double spacing is what teachers ask for. This is not terrifically easy to read, right? There's actually a little bit too much space here, but I can see that this gives me space to edit, right? So if I need to tell you you're wrong, this gives me space to tell you that you are wrong. This 1.15 generally is just a little bit lighter than single spacing, and that's kind of what it automatically does. We're not going to worry about any of these things. These are just for making stuff pretty in ways that we're not going to cover today. Now up here, I skipped over it, we have our font size. Standard font size selection. You can also just type in whatever number, plus, minus, whatever. You can do whatever you want. So if you want something bigger than this, just type it in, you're good to go. Just started at 11. If you do a paper, right, they want it in Times New Roman 12, so we can Control A, Times New Roman 12. And that's what teacher wants. Sometimes your high school teachers wanted that. Line and paragraph spacing, double. Awful, but whatever. Let's set that back. So 12. Now, 12-point type. Let's do the math and figure out if this is actually an acceptable line width for 12-point type. Remember, our line width should never really be much more than about 30 times our type height. Our type height is 12 points, so we multiply 12 points by 30. That gives us 360 points, And because 360 points is not a unit of measurement that we use, we divide that by 72 and we get inches. Exactly 5 inches to be specific. So we are at 6.5. We can see that the difference between 6.5 and 5 is not really that great at 12 points. So it wouldn't really kill us to leave it like this. Just see what it would look like. If we want to go from 6.5 to 5, let's pull off 3/4 on each side. So we're going to go from that 1 right there. That's a half, and then 2 more notches is a 1/4. We're going to do the same over here. Yeah, let's just grab this. We were right here, 5.75. Let's take off 3/4. Gets us down to here. Now we can actually see that this is 5 inches, right? Our relative measures. Makes me crazy. Some people like it. This is actually the right width for this. This is like the reading in a book kind of line width for 12-point font. Let's put that back. Now again, 12-point font is not really what we read as adults. It's what we're given to do papers in. That's it. Really, for adults to read, we want to be at something, Control A to select everything, or Command A. Really, we want to be at something probably more like a 10-point font. We could even go down to 9. 8 is getting a little bit tight, but you know, I have no issue using it if I need the space. But 9 or 10 are about what we want for an adult person who's, you know, not got any reading issues or eyesight issues to be reading. Now, if we take our font size, 10, multiply that by our 30, that gives us 300. And our 300 gives us about 4.2 inches. Now, the difference between, 4.2 is something right about here. 4.2 inches versus 6.5, that's a much bigger oopsie than, going from 5 to 6.5. So we're adding almost a whole nother inch of how much smaller this column should be. But doing this, right, if we just, let's go ahead and knock this in and then knock this in. Doing that looks much better, right? The lines look more correct, but now we have these huge white spaces on each side. And as much as I like good design, that's just killing a lot of trees, right? That is murdering more trees than I care to be party to. So let's put these back. That's our line. We don't like that. So there's another option that if you have this kind of type and you need to fit it on a page, but you don't want to, just shred paper, this is too wide. It's hard to read. It'll make people crazy. One thing that you can do that's really great that they added to Google Docs a long, long time ago is that you can go down here and you can pick columns. You can do 1 column, which is what we have now. You can do 2 columns, 3 columns, or more options. And it gives you all of your options here. Number of columns, right? We're probably just going to do 2. There's very rarely reason to do 3. Generally, that just breaks up the page too much. Sometimes you might, right? If we go down to like an 8-point font, we might actually want that. But generally, we want 2, and that's what I'm going to do here. Our spacing in inches is just the spacing in the middle of the page between the columns. There's no real right or wrong answer for this. You can definitely make it too tight. If it starts to get difficult to read, you've made it too tight, right? You've made the columns too close together and it looks too much like one continuous line. You've made it too big, and this is actually just a metric. You've made it too big when that space is bigger than the space between the edge of your type and the edge of the page. We talked about this a little bit before, that we want our objects on our page to be friends. So if I have an edge margin of 1 inch, right, there's an inch between the edge of the page and the edge of my type, that means that I could have this spacing in inches up to about 1 inch. I would probably want it a little bit smaller, but I could go up to about 1 inch. I could probably go up to like maybe 3/4 of an inch on this space right here, and it would look just fine. If I go up to 1.5 inches, it will make my columns look like they're not friends. We don't like that. We want our columns to be friends. So I'm going to leave this at 0.5 inches, but this is where to change it should you need it. This just puts a nice little hairline down between the columns. I'm not a fan of this. I think it's a little busy, but it really depends on what you're doing. If you want something to look a little bit older, that line between columns can really help. We have applied that. It has automatically split our page, and now this paragraph leads down to this paragraph, leads down to this paragraph, and then comes up here and starts again, goes down, and then comes down here and starts again. Now we can see that without wasting page space, we have a very nice line width here. We could actually go closer to the edge of our page. We can see this 1/2 inch here, and we can see that that's much smaller than our 1 inch here. Well, let's see. Let's go down to 3/4. And let's go down to 3/4. And now look at that. We can even take up more of our page, and it still looks really attractive. We have just a tiny bit more space here than here. It's not super perceptible, but we have more space here than here. You can see that we have a lot of space at the top, so we could even reduce that. And now the only reason you would really want to do this is if you were trying to get more information on one page. We can do the same thing at the bottom. So for those of you that are trying to cheat and get more, something's wrong here. Here we go. Sorry. Again, the non-standard measurements are freaking me out. If you want to get more on a page, this is a way to do it while still making it easy to read. If you're trying to cheat on a paper and get more space out of it, this ain't the way to do it. But we can see how nice this is, right? 3/4 of an inch here. Yeah, 3/4 of an inch here, 3/4 of an inch here, 1/2 inch here in the middle gives us a really nice spacing. We can actually see that there's a double enter right here, making that strange, but that's from my original type, right? I haven't gone in and started to edit any of this type, and I'm really not going to. A lot of times in design, you're just given type. So look at how nice that is, right? We have 3/4, 3/4, 1/2 inch. We can change all these measurements if we wanted to, and we can fit so much more on this page than we could if we made either the type big enough to fit the column, or if we did something else strange. Now let's go ahead, and I am going to format columns, 3 columns. This is a little bit thin. I think this is a little bit hard to read. Go ahead and just try to read a section of this. It's just too hard to read in my opinion. I could see where you could use it, but again, it's not what I would do for most things. 2 columns, great, gets the job done. If you have a lot of lists, this is something that can really help, right? Because lists don't use the full line width, and when they don't use the full line width, it's wasted space. But when we go to this, we can actually, like, this is a list right here. It's not very well shown because I just did a copy paste, but this is a list. Right? This line ends here. If I wanted to, I could use real bullets like an adult, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to use a dash. And we can actually see that each of these is a separate object. We can kind of see that this list, we're saving a ton of space by using this column format as opposed to using the full width, where these short objects just waste space into nothingness. Told you guys to ignore it, but this normal text over here, this is our styles. These are great. These are so useful, but it only matters if you know how to use them. So what we can do is grab this, format, paragraph styles. Now we can see a cleaner list of all of our things here. So let's say that I want this normal text that I've highlighted. I want that to just be my normal text. Now, this already has something it thinks normal text is. We don't want that. I picked what I want. I'm going to keep it. So what I'm going to do is just hit update normal text to match. Boop. That makes this normal text. So let's say I just screw all this up, right? I do this. It's bold. It's rubato. Then I'm like, dang, I need to fix that. Well, I can just grab all of that, and I can just poke normal text, and it will fix whatever I have. So if I copy in other things, and I forget to do that copy without formatting thing, I can do that, hit normal text, and then I'm good to go. The next thing is to create headers. So let's say I want this to be a header. Well, a header can kind of be whatever you want, as long as it gets your attention. It's really your choice. So let's say, does bold look nice? I think bold looks nice. So let's just say that that's what I want, right? I want my normal text, just want a little bit of bold on it. All right, so what we're going to do for that, we can see that the way it does headings, it does bigger headings down to smaller headings. And that's if we go here. We don't want to go here though. We want to go up here, paragraph styles, and we want to go heading 1, which should be our smallest one, right? We're just taking our normal type, we're making it a little bit stronger so we see it, and we're just going to hit that same thing of update heading 1 to match. These headings, right, we could use them, or if you really just wanted to be lazy about it, you could definitely just select this and just do it. The problem with that is what if I say, hey man, I really don't like the way you've done this. Instead of bold, I want you to do an italic, and then I want you to plus it 2 type sizes, right? That's still fine, still looks really good, but it's different. But now I have to go back and I have to select every single time I did that. But what I can do is undo that. But what I can do now is, let's say, right, we have these 3 that are all heading 1. And let's say that I don't like that anymore. I want my new thing that I just came up with, right, which is going to be that I said 2 type sizes up and an italic. That's what I want my heading 1 to be. Well, it's easy enough. I want these 3 to match. Now all I have to do is come up here, and I can go to heading 1, and I can say update heading 1 to match. I can also do it up here in format, paragraph styles, heading 1, update heading 1 to match. So update heading 1 to match. We can just change this. However, let's go ahead and give this a whirl. Let's select this, bold it, so we're bold, italic, and 12. Let's change our heading 1, update heading 1 to match. Let's make sure that worked all the way throughout. Worked there, worked there, worked there, worked there, and worked there. That seems to work. Now, that's fine. That saves us some time, especially once Google Docs decides to work with what we're trying to do. Also does this little guy right here, which is show document outline. And this is really nice for longer things because it gives you a heading, right? It gives you a list of what your document is made out of, so it's easy to find stuff. You can see as I scroll down, it's giving me each of those as I go past them. On a big multi-page document, this is real useful. So we can close that because that's not what we're playing with today. Now, where are you going to use this, right? All your teachers just want that standard document. You're going to use a standard document for most things, but we can use this for all sorts of stuff. If you're doing a cover letter or something like that, something with a little bit of style and design is nice. Something that's overly designed and funky is weird, and nobody likes that. One thing with all of this interest is that if you give this to somebody else as a document, it can break. All of these things that make it fancy, especially some of the 2-column stuff, will break. Given if you open this in there, or not will break, can break if you put it in other pieces of software. So when you're doing a fancy document like this, kind of doesn't matter where you're doing it from, right? If you're doing this in Word or if you're doing this here, just go ahead and when you export the document or save the document for sending it to somebody, save it as a PDF. That way that PDF has got all this shape information put in there, and then you just don't have to worry about stuff moving around. You don't have to worry about your fonts getting messed up. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. PDF does the whole shebang. Right, if we save in a Microsoft Word document, might work, might not, right? DocX, anything older than about 10 years, I can open that. Open document format will work most of the time. Rich text is good if you just want it to open on absolutely everything. Plain text will absolutely destroy your formatting, but it will be legible by literally all things. EPUBs are if you want it to be legible on a ebook reader, but I really wouldn't do sort of advanced formatting for an ebook reader because ebook readers do their own internal formatting, and you can freak out the device. So we don't want to do that. Really what we want for most things is to export to PDF. That way we know that our stuff works correctly. So we want to export to PDF when we want these fancy things to work right. I'm going to Control A. This is something that I actually do quite a bit, and for those of you that are students and are broke and need good Christmas presents, one thing that I think is really important that people my age and younger do is that they keep the recipes that their grandparents, parents, and great-grandparents kind of have. And most of the time this is just copying down all of the text that is that's on a card in a box, right? Like your grandparents have just a box of recipes, and most of them are handwritten or very poorly cut out of a magazine or something like that. And you want to take it and you want to make something that's nice to give somebody, right? So I'm going to take a recipe that is just copied word for word off of a sheet, and we're going to make it look like something that you can actually give somebody, right? Like you could be proud to say that, like, this was my grandma's recipe, I really liked it, and this is for you. And if you do a whole book of these, you can actually have something really nice. So I'm copying the text out of another document, and to ease my burden, what I'm going to do is I am going to paste without formatting. So now we've just used the formatting that is inherent to the document. So you can see that I have, this is from my dad. This is actually truly a grandmother recipe. And this is lists, and this is instructions. Now I'm going to be doing a little bit of text editing on this one as well. So this is a little bit more than just doing straight design. Again, most of the time in design, you'll be given a document and you just have to set whatever they give you. But we're not going to do that. We're going to do a little bit more editing because, that's the point of this thing. I can already see that this list wastes space, so this is a good candidate for the 2-column thing. And I can see that this is just a bunch of nonsense that's one big paragraph that doesn't really help us know what's going to happen. So first thing, let us format columns. 2 columns. Let's look at that. Perfect, right? We've already saved a bunch of space. This recipe isn't going to take up a whole page. I could make it take up a whole page, but it doesn't need to. So let's start working through this. We can see here that I have our instructions. This is something that I do when I work on just instruction sets of any kind, is I go ahead and I enter down, I double enter every sentence. This is not necessary, but this is just how I do it. I think it's important to do that sometimes, even if it's not the best way, it's just how I do it. So I have all my sentences as separate things. One thing that I'm going to do just while I'm working is, because this is a parent recipe or grandparent recipe, and it depends on who I'm giving this to, right? If I'm giving this to one of my friends, I can do it in 10-point font, that's fine. But if we're giving it to aunts and uncles that might be getting older nowadays, let's go ahead and bump this bad boy up. So I'm going to Control A. Oh, we don't have to do that. We have normal text. So what I can do is just select a little bit. Again, I don't like the Times New Roman, so I'm going to use Roboto because I like it. Looks cool. So I'm going to use Roboto, and I want this to be pretty heavy. Remember, 12-point is going to be helpful for people who have issues reading. And then I'm going to reset normal text, update normal text to match. Now we're there. Right, and once we get done and kind of see how much space we need, we could even actually go a little bit bigger if we want to make this even easier to read. And this is one of those things where audience and what we're making really matters. Because if I'm making you a book that you're going to sit down on the couch and read with it right in front of you, we want that really nice small font. But in this case, if we're doing it for older people or much younger people, or in the case of a recipe, right? A recipe is not right up against your face. Generally, you have that like shoved at the back of the counter and you got all your ingredients in front of you and you don't want to touch the page and you don't want to get close to it, so maybe a bigger font really is the right choice. But let's just do 12 points for now and see where we go. We could go up to probably 14, and you can see that our list doesn't really get any longer. Oh, sorry, I just did 14 there. Let us do this, right? We need to normal text, update normal text to match, and we can see that most of our list does not need another line. And I've made this much bigger, I've made it much easier to view if I want that, and I do. I do want that. So we have all this. So let's see, first let's go through. I've entered in all of these sentences into their own things. Let's go through and check and make sure that this is an important thing for when you're doing any kind of instruction set, is not only are all the sentences separate, we're going to put some of these back together, don't worry, we're not going to make it look like this, but also that we have concepts separately, right? If I have a sentence that includes 2 instruction concepts, right, if I say, go to the store to get me soda, that's 2 things. When we're writing instructions for other people, we don't do that. Go to the store, get me a soda. 2 separate things. It is much easier to do if we have 2 separate things, or if the things that we put together really kind of make sense together, or if they need to happen very quickly time-wise after one another. So let's see. Put onion and oil in large, heavy saucepan. Okay, that's fine. Heat, no. This is one of those things where this is a personal preference, right? Does this instruction and this instruction go together, or do they not? Right? So this is kind of where we need to think of what kind of voice do we have? What do we want this to come across as? Again, who's our audience? Does this make more sense? Does it make more sense with it apart? I kind of like this being together, right? Because this is the thing you're immediately doing after this first thing. You're not waiting, it's not a separate step. You're putting the onion and oil in there, and you're heating it on medium-high until brown. And then this is one of those things where how specific do you want to be? Right? Put onion and oil in large, heavy saucepan, heat on medium until brown. Until browned. Right? Until caramelized, right, if you want to be fancy. Or do we need to say until onion is browned? Or brown. Right? Which do we want? What looks right to us? How specific do we want our instructions, right? The oil's not going to turn brown, but we might want to be specific. Oh, and we can always use the Google grammar check. That's okay too. And this is going to say in a large, and we are going to accept that. Large 8-quart heavy saucepan. Do that. All right. Add all the spices, this ingredient, this ingredient. Then what we're going to do is, because we have this, we know that this should not be a comma. That should be a period with our next instruction, right? Put all this stuff in a heavy saucepan, next instruction, do the thing to it. Put all this stuff in, do the thing to it, right? And homogenized. This is another design choice. Do you use the word homogenized, or do you use the word until mostly mixed? Right? That's what it means. It just means mixed well. This just means mostly mixed evenly. I like homogenized, so we're going to leave homogenized. Add chicken and mix well. Okay, that's our 2 things. Do we want to split it up? I like splitting it up, so we're going to do that. We're going to put a period there, add chicken, mix well. Do this, do that. Do this, do that. That works. Reduce to medium heat low, reduce and stir. Now we need to look and see if we, oh, yep, see now this is where we have an orphan, right? This piece should actually be part of this thing up here. I'm going to do a criminal thing and put an enter there to get it down, we're going to have to pull that out. We're going to have to pull that out at some point because it's going to weirdly space our document once we set all this. But just to work on it, I'll leave it in for now. It's just something you gotta kind of have to have in the back of your mind to remember that you have a double enter somewhere and you need to pull it. Reduce heat to medium low, and then, yep, that's our first command. Stir occasionally until chicken is cooked through, and a time. Great. Whether this goes inside or outside the period is your choice. I like it inside the period, so that's the way it's going to stay. In a separate pot, parboil rice until all the water is absorbed and rice is partially cooked. Now, this is a completely different task. This is a different task. I don't like the fact that that's a different task and it's just in line as if it's some other thing. So we need to keep that in mind too, right? This is a different thing. We want it to be different. Then this here, add rice to the sauce and meat mix, stir well, and leave on very low heat, stirring occasionally for that. Let's see. Add rice, sauce, and meat mix, and we're going to put our period in there. Stir well and leave on very low heat. Put a comma here or not, it's really your choice. Stir occasionally for 10 to 15 minutes. And then the last command, if possible, make ahead of time. Rest refrigerator for up to 3 days to allow. Any number that's under 10, maybe 20 even, you should write out. 3. If you need to be specific, now this is the only other thing. If I'm saying 3 days, it's fine to just put 3 in there like this. If I'm saying 3 bolts, attach these two things together, then what I need to do is this. 3 with the number in there as well, because I want this to be obvious. If it's super, super dire, that is exactly followed, put it in quotes afterwards. That way people who are non-English speakers, or if you're reading it really fast and you misinterpret, it doubles up on your possible legibility. So that's what we really want to do. Anything where it's absolutely vital, write it out, parentheses, your number, and parens. Up to 3 days to allow flavors to mellow and rice to absorb and soften. I don't really like the way that's stated. To absorb what? Rice to soften. Let's just do that. I think that's cleaner. So, what does Google not like about this? If possible, yep, I like their suggestion. If possible, comma, make ahead of time. Let refrigerated. Now, this command here and this command here are kind of out of order. Right? This command here is out of order because really we want this to be ready by the time we get to this command. And this command, we actually need to know this 3 days before we need to eat this. Right? That's that command's kind of got to go first, right? Because we need to know that we're giving it enough time. We'll deal with those in a little bit. Let's go ahead and cut over here to this list. I do know that I'm going to want some space there, so I'll just give it to myself. Now, teaspoons, clove ground, missing a comma. Tablespoons, that's correct, capitalized. It's your choice whether or not to capitalize these words. I don't like it. I think it's better lowercase. And I'm just going to check all of these for consistency. We can see that it's upset that these two things are together. C. We know that C is cup, but that might be something that it is a small word. We can always do that, but I think that that's fine. Do we want to abbreviate veg? Or not. Okay. That'd be nice to spell vegetable, right? Vegetable oil or ghee. I think vegetable oil works better. It doesn't take up any more space, right? We're just typing into nothing space. So that's totally okay to extend that out and make it obvious what it is. One thing to note, if you have descriptors that are combined, like small curd cottage cheese, you can put a hyphen between them to say that the small refers to this word, not to the cottage or the cheese. I like the dash, so I'm going to throw it in there. 2 pounds of chicken thighs. Just a little thing, right? You're not going to have 1 2-pound chicken thigh, so go ahead and add your S in there. 1/4 to 1/2 inch chopped. This is good because this gives a description of what chopped is. This is a problem with a lot of these recipes that you're going to get from people, is that they'll say a pinch or 3-finger pinch. Well, what is a pinch? What is a 3-fingered pinch? What does chopped mean, right? Are they chopping a chicken thigh in half? Are they, chopping it into rice-sized pieces? What are they cutting it into? So it is good to throw these measurements in here. One thing, Google Docs will automatically make your little fractions, so that's what you want it to do, and that's totally fine. We can leave it like that. Maybe replace with protein of choice. Can't think of any shorter way to do that, so we're going to kind of have to let that be a long line item, and that's okay. 1/2 cup coconut milk, 1/4 cup lemon juice, 4 cups rice, 2 cups water. So this is really important that we're saying 2 cups water, because then we don't tell people how to parboil rice. Still kind of got to know how to do it, but that's okay. I think we can assume that people know how to parboil rice. This is our list, but this is kind of just a lot of stuff. How many items? That's 18 items if you count water as a separate item. So that's a lot of items. But we have these sections down here, right? Put onion and oil in a large heavy saucepan. Heat on medium-high until the onion is brown. Well, what if we do this? What if we take our oil and our onion? Look at that. They're already actually together. What if we take those out? Put them up there in their own section. Alright? Spices, cottage cheese, coconut milk. All the spices. Look, cottage cheese is already right there. And we want, last thing was coconut milk. All spices, cottage cheese, coconut milk, stir. So that's our first action. Our second action. Let's see, where's our next one? Here's our double enter coming back to bite us. Let's get rid of that. Reduce heat to medium-low, stir occasionally. So this command is just add chicken. So we can actually enter that out into its own line item. Oh, and now I can see that I actually have an extra ingredient, which is this 1/4 cup of lemon juice. And this 1/4 cup of lemon juice does not have a home. See this? Again, this is a recipe I just copied off the text. This isn't a good, well-done recipe. This is just typed off of a sheet. So what I need to do is now I see that, oh, well, this 1/4 cup of lemon juice is gone. I now need to know where that goes, when it goes in. I know how to make this dish, so I know where it goes. But this is something that when you do this kind of design work, it self-checks whether or not you're doing good design. It self-checks that you actually know all the things that you need to know. So we are going to look, where does that lemon juice go? And I know that that lemon juice goes in just after this and before the chicken. But just to save some space, we are going to say add chicken and lemon juice. Mix well. We've added a little bit of space, right? We've bumped it down to the next line, but that's all right. So now we can put our lemon juice in here with our chicken, right? Because this is one command right here. So that matches our one command here. These are the ingredients that go in there. This, you know, is part of that same thing. We could actually bring that up if we really wanted to. I think that that's a separate command, so it gets its own space. The parboil rice thing, we now have our 2 cups rice and 2 cups of water. I put this in parentheses, or I think it was put in parentheses to dictate that that 2 cups of rice and 2 cups of water is to do a parboil, which is slightly different. But if we don't want to do that, we can say in a separate pot, parboil rice in water. Well, that actually calls out that as a separate ingredient. So we can go ahead and put it like that together, and that tells us what we need for this command here. This one we don't need any ingredients for. This one we don't need any ingredients for. So I've separated this out. This is very nice. Now, how do I know, all right, I'm a new person, I've never seen this recipe before. How do I know that these 2 ingredients go to this? Well, I don't. But what we can do is instead of this empty space up here, I can put, do we want to say instruction 1? About step 1? Or, no, step 1 sounds like that's the step, right? How about just 1, 2, 3, and 4. Let's see if this looks right. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Yeah, I really don't like how that looks. So you know what? I'm going to take that out. That's okay. Sometimes we make things and we look at them and then we decide that we just don't like that. I think this is okay without having the specific callouts. So I think we're pretty good for organization and edit and things like that. So now it's time to make this document look pretty. Let's take a zoom out. Fit? No, you fit. Stupid, I forgot. So our document looks like this. You know what? For an undesigned for like a recipe without any design, this is fine. If this is just for your home recipe book, this is fine. It's got all the edits that make it, you know, reasonable to read, except not, because we want to take this and put it in a place of specialness, right? Because we want to tell people, hey, if possible, make this ahead of time. So what we are going to do is get rid of that, put it up here. If possible, make ahead of time. Right, because that's a nice little note to have before we get started on all this foolishness. We could even switch this around, right? Put all of our ingredients on one side, put all of our text on the other side. That's going to be less reliable than letting it float like this is. So let's see. So this is kind of nice in that I get this little bit of text and all my instructions are here on just this right side. Let's see if we can keep that. I doubt we're going to be able to. So let's go ahead and design this document. I'm going to make this bigger so I can see better. This is our title. I'm not going to use the subheads and everything. I'm just going to show you how I do it quick, which is taking this. And let's make this boy bigger. Now this is something that, are you designing one document or are you designing a bunch of documents? If you're designing a bunch of documents, just pick a size for your headlines, for your big headlines like this. If you're designing just one document, then of course fit this to your size, right? That fits to my size, 27 points. But if I'm making a bunch of documents, I think I probably want that to be 24. And what I'm going to do is set that as my title. update title to match. And then I'm going to set this back to normal text. So subhead, I don't really need anything bigger than the standard type that I'm going to use for the rest of this. If I want this to be bigger, I can, but I think we've decided that 24 looks good. We could also, should we want, select it, bold it. Well, do we like that better? Yeah, I like just the size. One thing I like to do in cases that are just notes, right? They're not part of what actually makes the thing happen. It's just a little note on the side. I like to throw that in italics, right? I like to throw that in italics. And one thing we can do is set that as a separate thing. I'm going to call it a subtitle. It's not really right, but I'm just going to set it as that. Subtitle, for some reason it made my text color gray. I don't want that. Subtitle, we're going to use, I had Roboto, normal, and italic. So what that's doing is just italicizing this, and it's setting it as a subtitle. Again, I use that for notes. This, also a note, right? This is not part of the actual recipe. This is a note. So I'm going to apply subtitle, which of course it hates me for because I did not actually set it. Update subtitle to match. That's what I missed. So now we have this like that. We have this like that as well. Now we have our ingredients list. Do you know what I didn't put? That would be very helpful. And do I want this to be title? Do I want this to be title? Wyatt decided that that 1 cup of grated onion just had to be title 2. I do not know. Sometimes I'm pretty sure it just hates me. There we go. One thing nice about having this big to little is that we don't need a double enter to give us the needed space. It's just obvious that these two things are separate things. So that works. All of our ingredients. Oh, we have 1 ingredient up here. 1 ingredient up here. We don't like that. So what we're going to do is grab all of this. And we can choose. We can make our ingredients a little bit harder to read, which actually, you know what, I don't like that. I like my ingredients being nice and easy to read. You know what I don't care about is subtitles. So what I'm going to do is I am going to knock down this font size to actually make it smaller than the rest of this. So what I'm going to do is update subtitle to match. Oh, that just screwed up my subtitle. Let's go ahead and fix that. Let's bring that down to 11. Right? I don't need to see this while I'm working on it on the countertop. When I'm looking at it in a book of recipes, I might need to see this, but I don't need to see it the rest of the time. Messed up my text color again. Subtitle, update subtitle to match. Now we should be good. There we go. So now I have this nice little note, then I have ingredients, and it's pulled my ingredients up to fill this, so I don't need to worry about it. And now up here, we can go enter, enter, and I can put in directions, instructions, your choice. I like directions. I'm gonna just put that like that. Title, that pops me in for a title. This is totally personal choice. I am a big fan of the second column starting lower than the first column. There are ways to set that, but it's also very easy just to tap and enter in there, and it will put it in correctly. Now we have our issue of this in a separate pot, parboil rice in water until all water is absorbed. We have that recipe. or we have that direction. How are we going to call out that direction as special? How are we going to make that different? Well, we could do the thing of, we could italicize it, but that makes it a note, right? I've already said that italics mean notes. So how are we going to do this? Let's get rid of it. Well, so this is our last thing. Let's put that back. This is our last command. So this is all kind of one instruction, and then this is a second one, and then we bring it all together for this last bit. And this is the real problem when you design any sort of instruction set, right? We think of instruction sets as linear, but oftentimes we have to do things in parallel. I know how we're going to do this, because we're making two different things. So we just call out that there are two different things. Let's put some space here, and we can call this the sauce. It's not really a sauce, but we'll call it a sauce. So this is the sauce. Now we need something between these two, right? I've given myself an issue where we need one object between these two. Let's just see what bold looks like. Let's say bold looks pretty good. Now what we can do is come out here, and we're going to call that heading 1, update heading 1 to match. Now what I'm going to do here is we have sauce. Here we have rice. And here we do need that extra enter. I pulled it out, but then looking at it, this has that space. This doesn't have that space, and that just doesn't look good to me. So we'll pop that down. And then pop this down. Now what do we call this last thing? Right? Sauce, rice, maybe to finish. And then we can either do that, or we can just use our heading. If you are having that trouble, it looks like a Shift-Enter will take care of the separation. Pretty much the only issue I have now is this minute being down here, and this well being right there, but for big documents, again, you're not really going to mess with that too much. If you want, you could go in and do the tracking thing. Yeah, Google Docs does not handle tracking, as far as I know. There might be something hidden away far, far away, but as far as I know, it's not there. So we're going to leave those alone. Now, again, this is a simple design. This is not something terrifically complex. It's not even that well thought out. I did it on the fly as we were doing this. So let's look. Everything looks good at this size. I can read it easily. I understand what's going on. And now let's look at it. This is something I like doing. It's making it small and then looking and then seeing if the different sections actually feel right. Right? If these were just objects on a page, if these were just gray shapes, do they feel like friends? Are they in the right place? Does this work for me? And it does. I think that this works very well. It's not fancy, again, but it gets the job done. And again, we're going to save this out as a PDF, and we're going to leave it as a PDF. One thing you may have noticed is I did not bring this down to 3/4 of an inch like I would sometimes. The reason I would not do that in the case of a recipe book specifically is that people like to put hole punches in their pages and then put those pages into a binder for recipes. Hole punches are going to take some of this space, so we don't want our text anywhere near those hole punches. And again, that is entirely knowing your audience. If you're going to make a book of recipes, you can get it much closer up to the edge, right? But if I was going to hand this to somebody, if I was going to give this to a friend, they're probably going to hole punch it. So I'm going to leave some space on the edges for those hole punches. You can also think of the edge space as space for people, to get dirty or for them to grab the edge and not cover it. however you want to think about it, but I like a little bit of space when I'm doing a design like this, and it totally just depends on your audience, your intentions, their uses, all of these things that we just have to know. Now, I say that we just have to know these things, but that's not really true. We have to just think through our projects before we start. So hopefully this helps you kind of design documents that are just a little bit easier, a little bit better, and a little bit nicer without any of the complicated tools. This just gives us something that looks a little bit better than what we started with without that much work. And I can give you what we started with. Page break is Control-Enter should you ever need it. That's what we started with. Right? Oh. And because I wasn't paying attention, paste without formatting. Right? This is what we started with. This is the instruction set that we began with, and this is what we ended with. This is a much nicer document, but it's not just being pretty and nice, it's also a more functional document. This is less functional, it's less good than this is. The prettiness is irrelevant. This is actually more useful than this thing. The prettiness is nice, but look at the difference. That versus that. Alright, have a nice day, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this and learned something, and I'm looking forward to seeing your projects.